as you can see, we're running a little off schedule here, so we're going to quickly jump right into the next portion of the program, which is Judicial Panel discussion regarding innovative approaches to drug-related crimes. And participating on that will be Judge Brian Grierson, Judge Ben Joseph, and Chittenden County State's Attorney T.J. Donovan. And Greg will be moderating it. Thanks.
So as the panelists get into position, I just thought I'd sort of explain what I hope to accomplish with this portion. And that's, I think, a lot of the time, at least as a prosecutor and a new prosecutor, when I started, obviously, was I didn't really quite understand the folks we were dealing with as a group, as a demographic. If you're like me and you're the oldest kid from this nice Irish Catholic family, you don't understand what these addictions are like. You don't understand the people. You don't understand the lives they lead. And if you don't understand that part of the equation, it makes it hard to find a suitable solution. So on the panel, the three folks that I've invited or that we've invited to participate are very, very clearly leaders in their respective areas with their approach to this problem that we all have within our court system and our society. T.J. Donovan is the Chittenden County State's Attorney, and he is one of the architects behind the Rapid Intervention Community Court, sometimes called the RIC program. I know I was TJ's deputy and employee for a while, and I gained a really much larger and more thorough understanding of the workings of the criminal justice system and how it affects the folks that are in it. I remember at one point when I was a brand new prosecutor, Paul and Mary from the Chittenden office who were back there saying, it's not us against them, Greg, it's not. And, that's an understanding that it takes me a while to come to. I'm hoping with TJ here to give a sense of, who these people are, what the community, of what their community is like, and, where do these problems come from? And if we understand that, maybe where can we go with them? Judge Joseph in the middle was the motivator behind the rapid referral treatment program. And what that was and is a program where individuals come in for arraignment, and we, I think call it the hangover arraignment, fair to say. And Judge Joseph read the bail statute, which is something that not many of us ever do. It's one of those you read it once and you're done sort of statutes. But there's a provision under the statute that said the judge can order any other conditions reasonably necessary. I think that was the moment for him when he realized there was, other things, more things the court system could be doing. And it was a tremendously successful program, and I would love for him to go into some more detail about that. And finally, Judge Grierson is the current presiding judge of the Chittenden County Superior Court, the criminal division, and he oversees the drug treatment court, among other treatment courts. So with that as a background, I would just, if the panelists could each just go into the outlines of your program. This is who we are. This is what we do. This is how it works. And then it's my hope that we can open it up to a more informal discussion and exchange of some ideas and information as folks start to hear things that pique their interest, and feel free to interrupt and ask me or them, and we'll go from there. So, TJ.
Thank you, Greg. Good afternoon. I think it's appropriate that we're following John's presentation, because I think it highlights the need for really the public health system, as we just saw from those stats, and the public safety system in which we all work in, to really work together, because we both impact each other. And in our business, the stat that we always look at in terms of measuring public safety is the recidivism rate. And that's how we define success or failure, is how many people are we putting into jail, how many people are going back into jail within 3 years. And I think the recidivism rate in Vermont is about 43% right now, which may be a little low, because the definition of recidivism in Vermont is if you have been reconvicted and then you've been incarcerated for at least 90 days. And I think everybody in the room knows that we're missing a lot of people under that definition who have in fact been probably reconvicted of a crime, but haven't been sentenced to a term of incarceration that is in excess of 90 days. And so the question for me is what do we do? What works? How do we keep our community safe? How do we do it in a system that is complicated, that is multi-jurisdictional, that has scarce resources? Everybody in this room has had the discussion, has had the frustration about not getting somebody held on bail, not getting somebody incarcerated, whether or not there's enough bed space. People going out on conditions of release, coming back in, and committing more crimes out in the community and coming back on a VCR only to have a prosecutor dismiss the VCR. It's a frustrating system. And so the question is, what works? And, you know, I'm not sure I have the answer to that. I think it's a host of a lot of different factors, and I know one of the requirements is everybody working together. The first thing I want to do when I leave this conference is talk to John and figure out how Seattle had that really steep decrease in the use of heroin from that stat. That's the one thing that jumped out at me. And so what I look at is what are other jurisdictions doing and what seems to be working, and how can we use those ideas from other jurisdictions and apply them in Vermont. And, you know, we started, you know, the Rapid Intervention Community Court, and it really has been a lot of different iterations, really looking at other jurisdictions, looking at Red Hook Community Court down in Brooklyn, which really took an approach of looking at these issues that drive crime from a public health perspective. Not looking necessarily at the theft, but looking at the issue of addiction, looking at the issue of mental illness, and bringing services to bear through the criminal justice system, using the leverage of the system to not only break down the barriers of access for treatment, but to ensure compliance. And that's a novel approach, because what we've done in Vermont for a long time is, and I'm preaching to the choir here, people are coming in on citations 6 to 8 weeks out. It's a misdemeanor case. We all know pretty much what the outcome is going to be. And the sentence is we get to the resolution, you know, 6 months down the road, where we're then ordering as a condition of probation for the person to get treatment. And so all we're trying to do is speed up that piece of treatment. And in order to do that, you really have to have the collaboration and the partnership with the public health side. And I think under Governor Shumlin's leadership and folks like Bill Lippert, who's here today, Vermont is really on that path, which is a great thing in my opinion, because for me, the best form of public safety is when we have people who are sober, who are stable, who are gainfully employed. And what I've come to question for me is when we have those low-level misdemeanor crimes, if our job is public safety, are we more safe if we're going to convict this person of her 5th retail theft? We're going to do one of 3 things. We're going to fine her, doubtful she's going to pay the fine. We're going to put her on probation 6 months down the road, and we'll see if she satisfies the conditions of probation. We could put her in jail, but we know that she's going to get out of jail. But if we can enforce treatment in the community, which I think John demonstrated with his presentation, which is much more is a lot cheaper, if we can ensure compliance, if we can get that person stabilized, and under this harm reduction model of reducing the harm to the community as defined of committing more crimes, that recidivism rate, I think that's something we should continue to work on. That's what we're doing in Chittenden County. It's interesting that we're having this conversation at this conference with drug driving, because I actually don't think any of driving offenses should be dealt with this way. Because for me, you can never lose the credibility of the citizens in the criminal justice system. And I have a very simple test of the crimes or the people that we'll put into these programs in the community. It's the straight face test. If the guy in the street would accept our decision to divert a case from the criminal justice system into treatment, I don't think a lot of people would for drunk driving or drug driving. So I don't think drug driving or drunk driving is appropriate for rapid intervention. I don't think it's appropriate for any community-based pre-charge program. It can be effective, and I think it's been demonstrated to be effective with a judicial order, and I'll let Judge Joseph talk about that. And I think, again, it's when we look at this, when we look at the criminal justice system as a whole, I tend to look at it as, you know, at the end of the road is going to be our jails. And we really should have exit ramps and off ramps all the way leading up to our jails based on science, where we're measuring people's risk and we're measuring their needs, and we're then linking them to the appropriate service in the community. And who's left on that road to jail should be people who are truly pose a threat to public safety and deserve to be in jail. So we get away from the argument about bed space. We get away from the argument about prison overcrowding, and that we make informed decisions. But a lot of it rests on prosecutors to start working together and be a lot more consistent across the 14 counties than we are right now, which is a whole other subject that we can talk about.
I'm going to start with a joke. It's pretty good. About 25 years ago, I was working in private practice, and I had to go to court with a client on a drug case. And I called the prosecutor, and I said, look, I think the kid is, he's kind of a mess, but if you put him on probation, and I got a little static, I said, no, not just Easy Street. He's going to be on probation. He has to do the special treatment program. I talked about what it was, and so he agreed. I said, so we'll meet with the judge. I said, fine, we'll meet with the judge. So we go, long story short, we go to the chambers, I meet with the judge. I said, Judge, would you consider probation if the kid has to do this special program of treatment? And he gives me this little smile, and he says, well, yeah, but it's got to be serious treatment, not 3 visits to Madame Rosa's massage parlor. So 25 years later, I'm a judge, and I'm sitting in Burlington, and Greg was doing arraignments with me. And it was like September 2008. So each of the next 4 months, the same kids are coming in on the same stuff. And you don't have to be a genius. You read the affidavits, and this is stealing to buy Oxycontin. That's what it is. So I thought, I've got to do something. Of course, Madame Rosa had moved to Bennington, so she wasn't available. I'm sorry, Bennington, I couldn't resist. So I looked at the statutes, and I realized that there was this kind of broad thing about, conditions that are necessary you can impose. But there was a specific one that had been put in 2005 or 6 that said that the judge could order an alcohol drug treatment program. So with all these thoughts in mind, I had experience in the past with Spectrum Youth and Family Services that had been very effective with kids with drug problems. And that's a long story, which I won't bore you with, but they'd been very successful when I was sitting down in Rutland with a kid who had dreadful, dreadful problems. So I called Spectrum, and I met with Annie Ramdesianu, and I said, this is what I want to do. And she said, fine, I'll take care of it. Huh? Yeah, that was pretty good. And what happened was, the next Monday, I'm doing arraignments, and she had given me standing appointments. And what we'd agreed to was, we can, I as a judge, if I think it's appropriate from reading the affidavits, which is, after all, that's the job of a judge at arraignment, right? So I read the affidavit, and I see that this is somebody's, some of these defendants are, they're not skilled interpreters of questions. And they're telling the officer I was stealing from my grandmother's checking account to buy the pills that I needed, right? So that wasn't too complicated. So I knew this person should be treated. So I made a deal. And for the next, 9 months, I had a big calendar in front of me, and every week there were appointments set aside with Spectrum. So I could send somebody for assessment. The reason I did that was, it may look to me like this is obviously a case for treatment, but I'm no drug counselor. And these problems are all complicated. Some of these kids, who knows what it might be. So what we agreed to was I would send this person to a specific place for an assessment. So on the first Monday we did this, I could look at this kid in the eye and say, tomorrow, Tuesday, at 31 Elmwood Ave, you will be there at 10:30, and you will meet with, I knew the name of the counselor. So you will meet with this person, and you will talk to them. And I had a detailed order all made up that said they'd have to go, and if necessary, they would submit to urinalysis, much tougher than Madame Rosa. And there would be weekly meetings, and there would be, this was serious treatment if they did it. So after about the first 2 months of this, it was going pretty well. And I got contacted by people from Howard Center saying, we know you're doing this for 16 to 23-year-olds. how about 23 and up? And I said, fine, we'll give it a try, because I knew Bob Wolford, and I really thought, I still think the world of him. I think he's a great guy. He's not been well lately, but I'm sorry to say he's had some trouble, but he's a great fellow. So I started sending people to the Howard Center if they're over 23. Bob told me later that the first 197 people I sent there, 192 showed up. And the reason for this, I think, was that I was always polite at arraignments, right, TJ?
Of course.
Of course, yeah, I was so polite. And I say, look, this is a condition. You got to appear at a certain time and place, and you're going to do this. And if you don't, it's a violation of law. You could be prosecuted. You know, maybe I didn't say it that harshly, but I let him know that this probably, yeah, well, whatever. But the point was that this was the threat of incarceration. You're going to be held accountable here. And you're going to go there and you're going to do this, right? If they tell you to take the treatment, you're going to do the treatment, right? You know, I could probably bore you for hours with these stories, but I'm just going to tell you this, that after the first 9 months, I got transferred somewhere else, right? And God bless him, Grierson's been making those orders, and it's going on. 2 or 3 years down the line, I was talking to Annie Ramnasianu about this stuff, and I think, yeah, Max Schluter was there at this meeting, and I said, Max, I'd like you to do a study just to show how effective this thing is. Another long story short, he did a 3-year retrospective. People that I put in this program in 2009, he did the next 3 years of what happened to them. 18% of them got arrested again. That was recidivism. It wasn't 90 days in jail. It wasn't, it wasn't all that BS. It was, did you get in more trouble? 18%. Now, they did a control group of 3, that was about 175 people who'd gone through this treatment I ordered. There was a control group of 300 people, similar, offenses, genders, all that stuff, age, a legitimate control group. Recidivism rate, 84%. Now, the people I was sending for treatment were not, this wasn't the average, 0.12, DUI. I put people in who were obvious to me, binge drinkers and chronic alcoholics. So I had a cutoff point of like 1.5. 1.5 and above, you had to go to this assessment to see if you needed treatment. And sometimes it came back that they didn't. The counsel would say there's whatever reason here, it doesn't have to be. And I was really relying on their expertise when I made these orders. But the curious thing about all of this is that with these dramatic differences, I had thought very naively that this kind of program would sweep the state. It hasn't quite yet, And I just tell you that I've realized the wisdom of people who tell me that change in the law business and enforcement is tough. I can't tell you how many people have told me that over the years. And it is tough, there's no question. But I think conditions of release can be very, very effective in controlling these problems. I was sympathetic when I was listening to these people talk here today. I've had the experience of sitting on the bench and you look down and here's this woman whose husband and 16-year-old boy have been killed by a drunk driver going the wrong way on Route 2. And they burned to death. And the woman looks up at you as the judge with some kind of expectation you're going to make it right. And you can't, there's nothing you can do other than express your sympathy. This is such serious stuff. And I'm just so impressed with what Ted's done here to bring you all together and to, if nothing else, to keep you all involved in this business. This is serious business. If you had that number of people murdered in shotgun robberies that have been killed by DWI and drug driving in the last year, yeah, I don't know what the public response would be. What we've got to do, we've got to do. And I salute all of you for what you're doing. This is very, very important work. I don't know why it has been kind of shunted aside. I'm really worried about pending legislation that will say that corrections will decide whether you'll go into a pretrial program. It doesn't make any sense to me. If there's going to be treatment, it should come through the courts. If the local prosecutor decides there can be a pretrial program, fine, but not corrections. Corrections has got budget problems. And I don't want them to control their budget problems by limiting the number of people that my colleagues, my ex-colleagues, can put in jail. There's been a legislative finding as part of this bill that, let's see, what do they say? Some studies, I wrote in the next to it, some studies show that incarceration of low-risk offenders or placement of those offenders in programs of supervision designed for high-risk offenders may increase the likelihood of recidivism. So I wrote next to this, some studies do some studies don't. And what programs are you talking about? And I really think what this means is we want to reduce the number of people going to jail. Well, I want to say on behalf of the judges, many of whom I have friendship with and others whom I simply know professionally, there's nobody putting people in jail from the bench of Vermont for no good reason. You know, if you say, oh, there's some of these eligible offenses, well, you know, one of the things you have to consider as a judge are what are the priors. You know, I once had someone in Grand Isle in front of me who had 17 previous convictions and never done a day in jail. Right? He learned really well, right? And then John Lavoie showed up to prosecute. And I gave him a big vacation because it was time. There are times when incarceration is something that's appropriate. I like to tell people that we should use short hits. You know, 30 days in jail are often a very serious and thoughtful sentence. I once sentenced someone who had done a pretty nasty thing, but he was an upper-class kid, and he had a good lawyer, and, you know, they were carrying on. I said, no, this kid's got to go to jail. Well, you would have thought that I'd proposed public castration. Years later, another judge who's a friend of mine said, I just want you to know, you remember that kid? And I said, yeah, I remember that kid. He said, well, he and his fiancée think you're the best thing that ever happened to him in his life. He spent the first 10 days in jail thinking about all the stuff he'd done wrong, some of which involved drugs and other things. And the next 20 days, he thought about all those things he was going to do to stay out of jail. And he did. I had this conversation 8 years after he got out, and he's just doing fine. There are times when short hits really are appropriate, and they should be used. And I think in this area of drug driving and drunk driving, there's such a danger to the public. There should be use of short sentences. You know, it should be done. The DW2 should be punished. You know, there should be a punishment. There should be a suspended sentence. And most of all, there should be treatment. And I think it should start right at the arraignment. It should start right at the arraignment. And it should continue on. And I think it's proven it can be successful. And I hope, as much as I can say to you, to help, to all of you, that this is not something to despair over. You know, this is something that a lot of the stuff we've seen here today shows that this is worth doing, and there's a lot of success that's going on in this process, in this good state of ours. Well, thank you.
Thank you. I don't have a joke to start out with. I'm not a good joke teller, but I will start out with a disclaimer. I'm here because I am presiding over the drug treatment court in Chittenden for the last 2 years. I've been in the drug treatment court in Washington County for 2 years. In less than 10 years on the bench, I've spent more than half my time involved in one treatment court or another. That's why I'm here, but I speak only, whatever you hear from the microphone are my views and not necessarily the views of the other 30 judges. Some judges just don't agree with drug treatment courts or the approach to them, but I'm here because I do believe in them, and I want to thank Judge Joseph for giving me, acknowledging the exercise of discretion and who I send to jail and how long I send them. It's a complicated process, and I'm not going to bore you with the details. I'm here because I think because of my involvement with drug treatment courts over the years. I want to thank Greg and the Governor's Highway Safety Program for inviting me here today. I sit here today, this afternoon, before you, literally and figuratively on the opposite end of the spectrum from TJ and Judge Joseph. And I say that because the drug treatment courts come into play at the very end of the criminal process. We are really the last hope before the ultimate sanction of a jail sentence whatever it is, 30 days, short hit, long hit. We are the last hope for most of these folks that bring you folks here today, whether it's drugs or drinking or driving. It's always a combination of the two. And that's why I'm here. And when I say I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum, TJ's program starts oftentimes pre-charge. Governor Shumlin's and the legislative initiative that Judge Joseph talked about has an element in it that is pre-charge. And Judge Joseph's program, which, yes, I have continued, and all the judges have in Burlington since that program was put in effect, is it's post-charge, but it's before a plea change or before sentencing. And the drug treatment court programs come into play at the very end, where there is a plea change, where there is acceptance of responsibility for why they're there. And this is the prelude to the ultimate sentence. And if they're successful in treatment court, they come out with a more lenient sentence than they would if they're not successful. These programs, the drug treatment courts, have been in effect in Vermont for more than 10 years in Burlington and Rutland. I believe they're effective. I've seen the results of them. I'm not going to give you figures. I thought that other fellow did a really good job with figures, and Karen Gannett can give you any figures you want on the success of these programs. But as I sat here and listening to those figures, and just before my eyes glazed over, I could put faces on most of those statistics that you were seeing. Those are the folks that come in to see me every Thursday afternoon, some 40 or 50 people. And when I say I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum, I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum from these programs for a lot of reasons. One, where we come in the criminal justice system, but also with the people that we're dealing with. The people that we are dealing with in the drug treatment courts are people, whether they're 20, 30, or 40 years old, half of their lives have been invested in addiction and the issues that come with addiction. These are folks that have lost most of what we would consider are signs of success in life. They've lost their homes. Many of them have lost their children. They work menial jobs under the table. They are there for one reason. Initially, they're there before me because they hope they have made an agreement with TJ's office that will get them off easier than otherwise. And I can't argue that that's why they're there initially. But the treatment courts will take them at best a year to a year and a half to get through them. It is hard work. It is difficult. They are not all successful. But those that are there work hard at recovery and recovering sober lives. They are there because they wouldn't qualify for the programs that TJ offers or that Judge Joseph talks about. These folks are high risk and high need. They are not appropriate for those programs. What we have in common, though, with TJ's program, with Judge Joseph's program that he started, and what the legislature is talking about now, the common thread is early intervention. Early intervention and monitoring is the only way you can get a handle on substance abuse, be it alcohol or drugs. And that's the common thread we have. It's to make these programs successful, whether you're talking about the program I'm involved in or these others. It's defining the population that you're working with. When Judge Joseph read, if you put the low offenders in with the more serious offenders, they're going to create more problems. That's also true with substance abuse. Not every person that comes into the court is addicted. We have to determine the level of risk and the level of harm that they are involved in. Are they users? Are they abusers? Or are they addicted? And the drug treatment courts deal with the high risk, the high need folks that come in with multiple offenses and serious offenses. And and whether you or I or anyone else wants to define them as violent, if my home was broken into, I would consider it violent. But somebody is there drug seeking. All of this activity is drug seeking. That's all it is. But we define those individuals who are appropriate for our program. And so there is a place in this whole spectrum for TJ's program, for what Judge Joseph has tried to do. But there is a place for the drug treatment courts, and it's an important place because it is the last, really the last opportunity these folks have. And we talked, somebody mentioned success in these programs and the rates of repeat offenders. We should not get caught up in only statistics. You have to look at what these folks have accomplished within any of these programs. Some of them will never have a lifetime of recovery, but we may be able to get them sober. A lot of these folks that go through these programs for the first time in a long time will achieve sobriety, and they will have not committed new offenses. And sometimes that's what the mark of success is. And so we have to be careful in defining success, that we look just to figures because they don't often tell the story. Everybody in this room has a reason to be concerned about substance abuse and how to address it. I think there's a general recognition now that incarceration is not the answer. It still is for some folks. But we've got to find alternatives. And what we represent here collectively are some alternatives that have worked and we think are successful. We need the support of the law enforcement, legislature, and the governor to make these programs more effective. And as Judge Joseph said, there's no reason why his program couldn't be in every county. It doesn't have to be exactly like we do it in Burlington. We recognize that we have resources that a lot of the smaller communities and counties don't have. But there is a way to address those issues and address them early on in some fashion, because that is the key to success. And that's what we hope to do through all of these programs. But we are dealing with serious, serious addiction, illness. And as I said, the faces that I put on those statistics bring it all home to me. When they talked about the rate of, or the number of heroin deaths going up. I have a young man in my court who, but for the use of Narcan, wouldn't be with us today. But that addiction takes such a hold on them that the day after the police got to his home and gave him the Narcan on his kitchen floor so that he could get up to live another day, he went back to the same dealer the next day and shot up again. So those are the folks we have to deal with. Those are the folks we have to not give up. Thank you.